They say a man who doesn't rebuild his personal life 5 years after a tragedy is considered a high-risk investment. William. It was that single, cruel sentence from his assistant that had brought him here. He sat in the quiet, minimalist space of Masa Restaurant, where the $200 million contract hung in the air like the scent of cedar and yuzu. The reconstruction of his life, a woman of extraordinary grace and intelligence named Emma Vance, sat right next to him. And she was playing his wife so perfectly that even he, the man who had signed the check to hire her, was beginning to believe the beautiful, dangerous lie. The atmosphere in the private dining room of Masa's New York restaurant could be described in 2 words, formal and tense. It was thick, heavy as a velvet curtain draped over a polished black lacquer table. William Croft, 38 CEO of Viridian Dynamics, felt the weight pressing down on his shoulders. He was the picture of controlled tension, his back straight, his Tom Ford suit unwrinkled, but his fingers occasionally clenched under the table. Across from him, Kenji Tanaka, a potential Japanese investor, listened calmly, his eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. The contract was worth $200 million. That number kept repeating itself in William's head like a mantra. It was the key to taking his green energy project to the next level, to beating the competition, and to proving that the past 5 years of hard work had not been in vain. And as you can see from the projections, William concluded, his voice even and assured, the solar conversion efficiency of our next generation panels is 18% better than the current industry standard. The expected return on investment is 25% within 6 years. The numbers were cold and convincing, but Mr. Tanaka only nodded slightly, his eyes shifting away from William to the woman sitting next to him. Emma Vance, 35, who plays Mrs. Croft for one night, is a portrait of serene grace. She wears a jade green silk dress, the color of which accentuates her neatly coiffed dark brown hair and pale skin. She doesn't say much, but her every gesture exudes sophistication. Mrs. Emmy Tanaka, the investor's wife, smiled at Emma. Mrs. Croft, that picture hanging on the wall is beautiful. It looks very old. Emma turned back, looking at the ink painting of a pine tree growing over a cliff. Yes, Mrs. Tanaka. It's a work by an artist of the Kano school, around the end of the Edo period. What's interesting is that the artist used a special technique called tarashikomi, where the ink or paint spreads on the still damp base, creating a very soft and natural effect for the foliage. A brief silence fell over the room. Mr. Tanaka raised his eyebrows slightly. William looked at Emma, surprised. All he knew was that it was an expensive Japanese painting that the restaurant used as decoration. Mrs. Tanaka was delighted. This is amazing. My husband and I are both very fond of art, but your knowledge is profound. Emma smiled modestly. That was my major. I always believed that art is a window into the soul of a culture. Then, in basic but precise Japanese, she added, it's like ikebana, the art of flower arrangement. It's not just about arranging flowers beautifully, but about finding harmony between heaven, earth, and man. That sentence seemed to have touched the hearts of the Japanese couple. Mrs. Emmy turned to her husband, their eyes exchanging an invisible message. And then, the decisive moment came. Mr. Tanaka placed his chopsticks down firmly on the jade stand. The small sound echoed in the room like a gong. He looked straight at William, but his eyes shone with warmth for both of them. Mr. Croft, he said, his voice deep and clear. Your figures are impressive. Your technology is promising. He paused. But it is the intelligence and temperament of your wife, Mrs. Croft, that completely convinces us. We believe that a man with such a partner must be trustworthy. Someone who understands the value of stability and harmony. William's heart was pounding. He could hardly breathe. We don't need any more time to think. Mr. Tanaka concluded. We want to sign the contract this week. The air exploded. William felt a wave of relief and excitement he hadn't felt in years. He smiled broadly, his first genuine smile that evening. Mr. Tanaka, that's wonderful news. We're honored. As they raised their sake glasses to toast, William's phone vibrated in his pocket. He politely excused himself and glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number, but he knew exactly who it was from. "Enjoy your family dinner. William, it's a shame it was all built on a lie. Paper walls are fragile." The words appeared like a venomous snake. The smile on William's lips froze. A chill ran down his spine. Marcus Thorne, his sworn enemy. He knew. Somehow. He knew. The paper wall. Fragile. And it could burn at any moment. 2 weeks ago, the air in William's penthouse office at Viridian Dynamics was thick with another kind of tension desperation. They're hesitant. Sarah Jenkins, his right-hand man, said bluntly, "I just had a call with their agent. Technically, they have nothing to complain about. The problem is you, William." "On me?" William frowned. "I provided all the data, all the credentials. I flew to Tokyo twice." Sarah sighed, placing a stack of papers on the table. "They're very traditional people. Mr. Tanaka believes that a strong business is built by a leader with a stable life. To them, a 38-year-old CEO, widowed for 5 years without a relationship, that suggests an inner turmoil, an unresolved grief that can affect long-term decisions." "Nonsense!" William slammed his hand on the table. "What does my personal business have to do with the performance of Silicon for them?" "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "They're investing $200 million. They want to invest in someone they can trust completely. They want to see a happy family. Or at least a partner." William paced the room, feeling cornered. He had spent the past 5 years building Viridian Dynamics from a startup into a formidable force. He had worked day and night, sacrificed everything, all to forget his late wife, Isabel. His heart had frozen since she left. Now that emptiness threatened to destroy everything he had built. It was then that Sarah made a bold suggestion. "William, this is a crazy solution, but it might be the only one. There is a high-end agency, Elite Companions. They provide companions for important events. Everything is legal, discreet, and professional. We could hire someone." William paused, looking at Sarah as if she had spoken an alien language. But then the image of the $200 million deal and Marcus Thorne's smug smile if he failed flashed through his mind. "Find someone," he said, his voice dry. "Someone smart, sophisticated, and someone who can keep his mouth shut." Meanwhile, a few miles away, in a small apartment in Queens, Emma Vance was staring at a stack of pale blue bills on the kitchen table. The total was $85,000. That was the estimated cost of the open-heart surgery her 22-year-old sister, Chloe, desperately needed. Chloe had just graduated from college, her whole future ahead of her, but her fragile heart was threatening to take it all away. Emma put aside a promising PhD in East Asian art history to care for her younger sibling. Her job at a small gallery barely covered her living expenses. She tried everything: loans, crowdfunding, but the numbers were still too far away. Helplessness gnawed at her every day. While she was surfing the web aimlessly, she came across a discreet ad. "Elite Companions, take your event to the next level." Discreet, professional, great pay. Her pride screamed at her. But then she looked at Chloe, lying on the sofa, her face pale. Her love for her sister triumphed over all. She picked up the phone. A week later, William and Emma met for the first time at a neutral law office in Midtown. William arrived first, cold and distant. When Emma entered, he was a little surprised. She was not what he had expected. There was no trace of someone who did this for the money. She had an air of dignity and intelligence. Her brown eyes looked straight at him, without a trace of subservience. "Hello, Mr. Croft?" she said, her voice clear and calm. Their conversation was strictly business. The lawyer laid out the terms: $75,000 for a week as his fiancée, including 2 dinners and a social event. Strict confidentiality clauses, with heavy financial penalties for violation. Emma read the contract carefully. She asked pointed questions about boundaries, about what was expected. I won't lie about things I don't know. I won't fabricate a complicated love story. My role is to be your smart, supportive partner. Okay. William nodded, somewhat impressed. Okay. The less fabricated details, the better. He looked at her. He saw a woman with dignity. She wasn't here to seduce him. She was here to do a job. And he felt a strange sense of relief. Emma looked at him. Behind that cold, successful exterior, she saw a deep loneliness in his eyes, a weariness that money could not hide. They signed the contract, black ink on white paper, a deal built on desperation and lies, sealing their fates together in one fateful week. The heavy oak door of the penthouse William had rented for his play slammed shut, cutting them off from the outside world. The excitement of dinner had evaporated, leaving only the stark reality of the situation and Marcus's threat. "Here he is," William said, handing the phone to Emma. His voice lacked its usual confidence. Emma read the message, her face turning serious. "Has he been following us, or does he have someone in the brokerage firm I don't know?" William admitted, loosening his tie. "But Marcus doesn't make empty threats. He'll find a way to expose us right before the signing." They were no longer master and servant. They were partners in crime, bound by a dangerous secret. They sat down on the sofa, the distance between them seeming to shrink. "We have to be more careful," said Emma. "Every detail, every gesture." Silence fell. For the first time, William looked at Emma not as a rented property, but as a person. "Tonight, you saved my life. About that painting, how did you know?" Emma shrugged. "It's my passion." "Well, it was..." She paused, then decided to tell the truth. "I have a PhD in East Asian art history. I was going to be a researcher before. My sister, Chloe, got sick. And so she told about Chloe, about her unfulfilled dreams, about her financial burden. There was no self-pity in her voice, just the stark truth." William listened, and the ice wall around his heart, which had been built solidly over the past 5 years, began to show cracks. He saw in her a resilient strength that he greatly admired. "I'm sorry," he said, and it was completely sincere. "About your sister." Then, in a rare moment of weakness, he opened up. "My wife, Isabel. She loves art too. She's the one who pulled me out of the dry numbers. Since she died in the accident, I've only known work." It was the first time he had said Isabel's name out loud to a stranger in years. They sat in silence. But the silence was no longer awkward. It was filled with understanding and an unexpected bond. The next day, their plans were disrupted by a call from Mrs. Emmy Tanaka. She, out of affection for Emma, invited the Crofts to tea and a tour of the Japanese garden in Brooklyn. It was impossible to refuse. In the garden, Emma was like a fish in water. She was absolutely radiant. She walked beside Mrs. Tanaka, explaining the meaning of the curved wooden bridge, the strategically placed stones in the koi pond. William followed a few steps behind, silently observing. He couldn't hear what she was saying. He just saw the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves, illuminating her hair, the way she smiled, a bright, natural smile. He realized an alarming truth: he was attracted to her, a lot. And then, like an ominous sign, Marcus Thorne appeared. He was with another man, apparently a business associate. "William, what a coincidence," Marcus said, his smile not reaching his eyes. He glanced Emma up and down. "And this must be the mystery woman everyone's been talking about." "Nice to meet you, Miss Emma," she said, holding out her hand with perfect calm. "Emma Croft." "Croft," Marcus repeated, emphasizing the word. "How long have you two known each other?" William is very private, never talking about his personal life. It was a trick question. William felt the blood rush to his head, but before he could say anything, Emma answered, her voice light as air. There are some things that are most precious that need not be boasted about. Mr. Thorne, we believe that true happiness lies in private moments. That clever and tactful reply stopped Marcus. He could only smile wryly and take his leave, but his eyes left a clear warning. That encounter caused the cheerful atmosphere to vanish, replaced by a palpable tension. That night, they returned to the penthouse. No one spoke of Marcus. Instead, they focused on work, reviewing investor files for the signing ceremony. William explained the technical terms. Emma listened, occasionally asking insightful questions that surprised him. While they were both looking down at a chart, their hands accidentally touched. A faint current ran through both of them. It was instantaneous and undeniable. They looked up at the same time, their eyes meeting. In that moment, there was no contract, no lies, just a man and a woman aware of the intense attraction between them. Space seemed to freeze. William's heart pounded. He wanted to lean forward, to erase the distance between them, but he didn't. Emma didn't move. They were adults bound by complicated circumstances. This fake relationship was becoming dangerously real, and they were both afraid of it. They silently withdrew their hands. But the atmosphere in the room had changed forever. The large conference room at Viridian Dynamics headquarters was brightly lit. Lawyers, senior executives, and the Japanese delegation were all present. The atmosphere was solemn and expectant. A $200 million contract sat neatly on the table, next to an expensive Mont Blanc pen. Mr. Tanaka smiled at William and Emma, who were sitting next to him, their hands resting lightly on the table, a practiced gesture that now felt strangely natural. Ready to make history. Mr. Croft, more than ever. Sir, William replied. Mr. Tanaka picked up the pen. The tip of the pen almost touched the paper. Boom! The conference room door swung open with a bang. All eyes turned to the door. Marcus Thorne stood there, his face set in a look of vicious triumph. Beside him was a man with a camera, clearly a journalist. "Stop!" Marcus shouted, his voice echoing throughout the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, do not put pen to paper. You are about to sign a contract based on blatant deception." A deadly silence fell. William's lawyers stood up. Mr. Tanaka withdrew his hand, his expression turning icy. Marcus entered the room, throwing a stack of papers on the table. Here, this is the truth about William Croft's happy family. On top was a copy of the brokerage agreement William and Emma had signed. Their names, the amount of $75,000, and the confidentiality clauses were clearly visible. This woman, your Honorable Mrs. Croft, Marcus pointed at Emma, is really Emma Vance. She is not William's fiancée. She is a hired actor, a gold digger paid to deceive all of you. His words were like knives stabbing straight into Emma. She felt her face burning, her ears ringing. Every eye in the room was now looking at her with suspicion, contempt, and pity. William's future, her honor, Chloe's life. Everything seemed to collapse in an instant. William stood up. "Marcus, get out of here." "Why afraid of the truth?" Marcus sneered. "Your CEO lied to everyone for money. Can you trust someone like that? Everything was on hold. William's contract was dead. His reputation was ruined. And Emma, she felt like a sinner. But then, amid the chaos and despair, something inside Emma emerged. It was the strength she had used to face her sister's illness, to face her career in ruins. She would not let someone like Marcus Thorne define her. She took a deep breath and stood up. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked straight at Mr. Tanaka, who was looking at her with a look of deep disappointment on his face. "What, Mr. Thorne said?" She began, her voice unwavering but clear and sharp, echoing throughout the conference room. "There is some truth to what he said." A murmur arose. William looked at her, alarmed. "It's true that Mr. Croft and I are not fiancés." She continued. "It's true that I agreed to take money to play this role." She paused, letting that stark truth sink in. Then she continued, her voice now filled with emotion, but still strong. "But the reason I did it was because I needed $85,000 to save my sister's life. She needed emergency heart surgery. I did what any sister would do. That's my truth. Seeing her extraordinary courage, something inside William broke. The fear, the calculation, all disappeared. Only admiration and a fierce love remained for the woman standing alone against the world. He stepped forward, stood beside her, and in an act of pure instinct, he took her hand. Her hand was cold, but he squeezed it tightly. And the truth that Mr. Thorne doesn't know, William said, his voice booming, his eyes focused on everyone but Emma, is that in the process of making that contract, I found something I thought I had lost forever. I fell in love with this woman. The whole room held its breath. The contract may have been fake, he continued, but my feelings were real. My attraction to her intelligence, her kindness, and her strength was real, and my desire to build a future with her was 100% real. He turned to Emma, ignoring everyone else in the room. I love you, Emma Vance. Not for the role, for who you are. Tears began to roll down Emma's cheeks, but they were tears of shock and happiness. The silence in the room was broken by a clearing of the throat. Everyone turned to look at Mr. Tanaka. He was no longer cold. Instead, there was a hidden, meaningful smile on his lips. He looked at William and Emma, then turned to Marcus, who stood there stunned. Mr. Thorne, said Mr. Tanaka, we came here to invest in an energy project, but more importantly, to invest in people. Honesty, however late and difficult, is worth more than 1,000 beautiful lies. He turned back to William and Emma, a man who admits his mistakes and speaks the truth from his heart. A woman who does everything for her family. Those are the true values we are looking for. He picked up the Mont Blanc pen again, this time without hesitation. Attorney, let's continue. There was a resolute swish as Mr. Tanaka signed his name on the contract. After the investors and lawyers left, after Marcus Thorne was humiliated by security, the conference room fell silent. Only William and Emma remained. They stood there, in the remnants of the storm, hands still clasped. The awkwardness had gone, leaving only a new and beautiful truth between them. William pulled a checkbook from his inside pocket. He wrote carefully and handed it to Emma. Here, he said softly. Emma looked at the number on the check, $85,000. This isn't a contractual payment, he continued, his voice soft. This is Chloe's hospital bill. It's not a payment, it's a gift. Because your family, from now on, is something I care about too. Emma looked up at him, tears of joy welling up in her eyes. She didn't take the check right away. Instead, she walked to the table and picked up the fake contract Marcus had thrown. With a swift movement, she tore it in half, then into quarters. We don't need this anymore, she said. William smiled, a genuine, warm, happy smile. He stepped forward, gently wiping away the tears from her cheeks. He leaned down, and they shared their first kiss. A kiss that wasn't staged, without calculation, without fear. It was gentle, deep, and full of promise, the beginning of their true love story. 6 months later, the golden afternoon sun shines down on the backyard of a cozy suburban home, far from the hustle and bustle of Manhattan. Chloe, looking healthy and vibrant after a successful surgery, sits reading under an oak tree. Inside, Emma was arranging a vase of white lilies. She was no longer working in the small gallery. Now, as William's de facto partner, she was leading a new initiative at Viridian Dynamics, a cultural fund to support young artists and art conservation projects. She had found her passion again, in a way she never expected. The back door opened softly. William, who had come home earlier than usual, walked in. He was no longer the cold, distant CEO. His eyes warmed when he saw her. He walked over, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you doing?" he asked, breathing in the scent of lilies and her hair. Create a little harmony between heaven, earth, and man. She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. They stood there in silence for a long time, watching the garden and the setting sun. The fragile paper wall had burned away, and from its ashes they had built something much stronger and more enduring, a love that had been tested by storms and built on a foundation of truth and courage. A true love. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you love this story, don't forget to click like to support the channel. Share this story with family and friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories.